When I decided to throw a small dorm party, I swear it was supposed to be harmless. Nothing crazy, nothing wild, just a little mid-semester celebration for surviving midterms without losing my mind. My name's Mia Lawson, I'm a sophomore at Alderwood University, and honestly, I'm not the party girl type. I'm more the stays up until 3 a.m. finishing a paper and then rewards herself with microwave mac and cheese kind of girl. So when I say I didn't mean for things to spiral, I mean it. But that one night changed how everyone on campus saw me. It started on a Thursday. My roommate, Kara, had been begging me to host something for weeks. She's the social one, outgoing, effortlessly popular, always knows everyone's business. I'm quieter. I like people, but I like manageable people. Still, I was tired, stressed, and needed a break. So I said fine. One small dorm party. Just a handful of friends, some snacks, maybe a cheap bottle of wine if no RAs were patrolling. Harmless. The moment I agreed, Kara lit up like she'd won the lottery. She started decorating our room, fairy lights, throw blankets, a little Bluetooth speaker. She even made a Spotify playlist called Ashcroft After Dark. I remember laughing at the name, completely unaware that by the end of the weekend, everyone on campus would know it. We told maybe 10 people. That was the plan. I texted my study group, Kara invited her friends from the swim team, and that was it. But the thing about college is that news travels faster than you think, especially in dorms like Ashcroft Hall, where privacy doesn't exist. By 8:30, our door was open, the lights were low, and people started trickling in. It was perfect. Someone brought chips, someone else brought Oreos, and Kara mixed up this bright pink mocktail that definitely wasn't alcohol-free. I figured as long as no one was getting loud or stupid, we'd be fine. For the first hour, it was exactly what I wanted, just people laughing, talking about classes, gossiping about professors. The kind of night that makes you forget how stressful college can be. But then someone, still don't know who, posted an Instagram story of our setup. A boomerang of Kara pouring the pink drink, tagged with @AshcroftAfterDark and a winking emoji. That's when things started to shift. At first, it was subtle. A knock at the door, then another. "Hey, we heard you're having people over." It was just a couple of guys from the floor below, and Kara, being Kara, told them to come in. A few minutes later, someone else showed up, friends of those guys. Then friends of their friends. Before I knew it, our room, which was meant to hold maybe 10 people comfortably, was packed with at least 30. I was standing on my desk chair, trying to fan the air toward the window because it was starting to smell like perfume, sweat, and spiked punch. People were sitting on my bed, leaning against my desk, blasting the music louder and louder. I remember staring at my laptop on the corner of the desk, terrified someone would spill something on it. I wanted to tell everyone to leave, but Kara kept laughing, saying, "Relax, Mia, it's college. This is fun." But it wasn't fun anymore. Not for me. I kept checking the hallway, waiting for an RA to appear. It was almost midnight when the first real problem happened. Someone had brought a portable speaker, one of those huge ones, and tried to plug it into an outlet behind the mini fridge. The outlet sparked. Literally sparked. The speaker fizzled, and within seconds, smoke started coming out from behind the fridge. Kara screamed, someone spilled their drink trying to move it, and then the fire alarm went off. That sound, shrill, echoing through the whole building, was like a gunshot. Everyone froze for 2 seconds, then chaos. People rushed out into the hall, trying to hide bottles and cups. Someone tripped and knocked over a bowl of popcorn. I grabbed my jacket, my ID, my phone, and ran out into the cold night with the rest of them. It was a scene, half-dressed students shivering outside, some still laughing, others panicking. The RA showed up within minutes, looking furious. And right behind them? Campus security. I remember locking eyes with Jason, one of the senior RAs. He was the kind of guy who took rules way too seriously. He started demanding to know who organized the event. Kara immediately looked at me. I wanted to scream. I tried to explain it was just supposed to be a small gathering, but no one cared. Everyone was too busy filming the chaos for Snapchat. By the time the fire department cleared the building and let us back in, it was almost 2 a.m. The hallway was trashed, sticky floors, spilled drinks, someone's shoe in the stairwell. The air reeked of burnt plastic from the short-circuited outlet. Jason made us stay behind to talk to security. They took my name, my room number, and said we'd hear from administration soon. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen texts from random people I didn't even know. Screenshots of a TikTok showing people running out of Ashcroft with the caption, POV, when a chill dorm night turns into a full-on evacuation, loudly crying face fire. The video had over 20,000 views overnight. And the thumbnail? Me, standing by the door holding a red cup. My face front and center. I wanted to crawl into a hole. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it would blow over. College attention spans are short, right? Wrong. By Monday morning, I walked into my communications class and felt everyone's eyes on me. Whispering. Smirking. One guy even clapped sarcastically. Ashcroft celebrity in the house, he muttered. I wanted to disappear. That afternoon, my inbox pinged with an email from the Dean of Students. Please report to my office regarding a recent incident in Ashcroft Hall. My stomach dropped. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding, knowing that one night of poor judgment had just exploded into something I couldn't control. I showed up at the dean's office the next morning, wearing my neatest sweater, trying to look responsible. But when I walked in, my eyes landed on something that made me feel physically sick. Sitting right on the dean's desk was the latest issue of the Alderwood Gazette, the student-run newsletter. The headline on the front page read, Ashcroft Dorm Party Sparks Campus Chaos. And beneath it was a full-color photo of me, laughing, cup in hand, framed perfectly like a guilty poster child. I froze. I had no idea that photo even existed. It wasn't from the TikTok. It wasn't from anyone I knew. I opened my mouth to speak, but the dean was already reading me the list of policy violations. Unauthorized gathering. Noise disturbance. Potential alcohol use. Each word felt like a nail in a coffin. I tried to explain that I didn't invite half the people who showed up, that I had no idea things would get that out of hand. But she just gave me this tired, disappointed look and said, Mia, the consequences aren't always about intent. They're about impact. I left her office numb, clutching a warning slip and the sinking realization that this wasn't just a minor dorm issue anymore. The whole school knew. My professors knew. My parents would find out soon enough. But as awful as that felt, it wasn't even the worst part. Later that day, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a link to the online version of the Gazette article. I clicked it, expecting embarrassment. But at the bottom of the piece, under photo credits, there was a name. Ethan Cole, campus journalist. I didn't know him, but that name would soon become impossible to forget, because he was about to change everything I thought I knew about what really happened that night. I must have stared at that name, Ethan Cole, for 10 minutes straight. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I needed to find him. I had questions. Like, who gave him permission to use that photo? And more importantly, how did he even get it? No one in my room that night had a camera like that. The next morning, I found him sitting alone at a table in the student cafe, typing furiously on his laptop, earbuds in. I hesitated before walking over, but something about the whole situation was eating me alive. I had to know. When I introduced myself, he looked up with this flash of guilt in his eyes, like he'd been expecting me. He closed his laptop slowly and said, "You're Mia." I told him he was right and asked, point blank, why he'd used my picture without permission. He looked uncomfortable but didn't deny it. He told me the photo was submitted anonymously to the Alderwood Gazette's tip inbox, and his editor had assigned him to write the story around it. It wasn't personal, he said. The photo made the story go viral. The editor wanted a face to match the chaos. My chest burned with anger. I told him that photo wasn't even from that night, that I'd never seen it before. He frowned, said that was weird, and started scrolling through his phone to find the original submission. Then he froze. The metadata, the file info attached to the photo, showed a timestamp from 2 days before the party. Meaning someone had been planning to leak that image long before anything went wrong. He looked genuinely rattled. I could tell he hadn't realized that part. I asked him to tell his editor to take the article down, but he just shook his head. They won't, he said. The story's already too big. It's getting picked up by the university's PR team. That word, PR, made my stomach twist. It wasn't just a student story anymore. It was school property now. The university was using it. Ethan offered to dig a little deeper, said he'd see where the submission came from, but he warned me that student media was technically under administrative review because of some sensitivity issues. Whatever that meant. Still, I agreed. At that point, what did I have to lose? 2 days later, he texted me, found something. You might want to see this. We met again in one of the study lounges late at night, and he brought his laptop. What he showed me didn't make sense at first. He'd traced the photo submission to a student email, but not just any student. It was Kara's. My roommate. The same person who convinced me to throw the party in the first place. I felt my blood run cold. Ethan said the tip had been submitted anonymously from a burner email, but it was tied to Kara's campus Wi-Fi login. I sat there staring at the screen, my thoughts spinning. Why would she do that? Was it a mistake? Some sick joke? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there. Ethan said maybe she didn't mean harm, maybe she'd just sent the photo as a prank, but the timing didn't feel like a coincidence. I told him I needed to talk to her myself. When I got back to our room, Kara was sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone, acting like nothing was wrong. I asked her straight up if she'd sent anything to the Gazette. She looked at me for a second too long before she laughed it off and said, Mia, why would I do that? I'm not stupid. But her tone wasn't defensive, it was flat. Distant. Like she'd already rehearsed the denial. I wanted to push, but something in her eyes made me stop. It was the same kind of look she got when she was caught in a lie, just a flicker of panic, gone in an instant. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about how quickly she'd distanced herself from me after the party. How she'd suddenly stopped tagging me in photos, how her new TikToks never showed our room anymore. She'd been out late a lot, studying with friends. And when I checked the Gazette website the next day, there it was, a new article, written by someone else, titled University Considers Dorm Policy Changes After Ashcroft Incident. It mentioned my name again. But this time, Kara's name was in it too, listed as a resident witness. I almost dropped my phone. A witness. She hadn't just leaked the photo. She'd spoken to the paper. Ethan texted me that morning saying he didn't approve that story, and that the editor told him it was university requested. That's when I started realizing this wasn't just Kara's betrayal, it was something bigger. The school was trying to turn my story into a PR move. A cautionary tale about dorm safety, alcohol, and responsible student behavior. I wasn't a student anymore, I was a headline. That night, I confronted Kara again, and this time she didn't laugh. She got defensive, said she didn't think it would blow up like this, that she just wanted some attention, that the photo was supposed to be funny. Supposed to be funny. I stood there shaking while she talked about it like it was nothing. She told me she'd been struggling with her social media engagement and thought tagging the Gazette's tip line would get her noticed. My roommate, my best friend, had traded my privacy for likes. And the worst part? She didn't even look sorry. Ethan told me later that he tried to stop the newsletter from running any more follow-ups, but his editor told him something strange. Apparently, the administration had taken over editorial control of the Gazette's next few issues. They wanted to shape the campus conversation. In other words, they wanted to control the story. I told Ethan I was done. I didn't want my name in any more articles. But that same night, I got an email from the dean's office again. The subject line read, Mandatory Conduct Hearing, October 17th. It was signed not by the dean, but by the vice-chancellor of student affairs. That wasn't normal. Ethan called me 5 minutes later, his voice low and urgent. He said, Mia, don't go to that hearing alone. When I asked why, he paused, then said something that chilled me to the bone. Because someone wants to make an example out of you. When Ethan told me not to go to the hearing alone, I thought he was being dramatic. But the way he said it, the edge in his voice, made something deep in my gut twist. I spent the next few days trying to pretend I wasn't terrified, but every time I checked my email, there were new reminders from the administration, the time, the location, the attendance required notice in bold red letters. I kept hoping someone would tell me it was all a misunderstanding. That it wasn't as serious as it sounded. But when I showed up to the student affairs office that Tuesday morning, I knew immediately this wasn't just a disciplinary meeting. It was a setup. The conference room was cold, the kind of sterile that makes you want to shrink into yourself. A long table, 3 faculty members on one side, none of whom I recognized, and a recorder sitting right in the middle, blinking red. The vice-chancellor herself sat at the center, wearing this tight professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself and the others, calling it a review board. She asked me to sit. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my folder. She started reading from a document. On the night of September 29th, Ms. Mia Lawson hosted an unauthorized gathering in Ashcroft Hall, resulting in building evacuation, property damage, and multiple safety violations. Her tone was detached, like she was reading a grocery list. I tried to speak up, to explain that it wasn't how it sounded, that people showed up uninvited, that I hadn't meant for it to get out of hand. But before I could finish, she interrupted me. We've heard multiple accounts, she said. And seen photographic evidence. Then she slid a printed photo across the table. My breath caught. It wasn't the one from the newsletter. It was different. This one showed me standing near the microwave with Kara beside me, laughing, and behind us, a group of people holding up bottles. The timestamp in the corner said 11:57 p.m., the exact moment before the alarm went off. But the angle, the clarity, it wasn't taken on a phone. It looked professional. I asked where they got it, and the vice-chancellor just said, it was provided by a student reporter. My mind immediately went to Ethan. But he'd told me he hadn't taken any photos that night. I asked if it was from him, but she didn't answer. Instead, she said they were considering further sanctions, possibly a semester-long suspension. I felt like I was going to throw up. They weren't just punishing me, they were building a case. After the meeting, I walked out into the hallway in a daze. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I barely made it down the steps before I saw Ethan waiting outside, pacing. When he saw my face, he didn't even ask how it went. He already knew. He said, "They're using the photos, aren't they?" I nodded. He swore under his breath and said he'd suspected as much. He told me something he hadn't mentioned before. After our last conversation, his press credentials had been suspended. Officially, it was because he'd violated source confidentiality, but he thought it was because he'd started asking questions about how the Gazette got the original images. He'd found out the files had been uploaded not through the normal student portal, but through a private server that was connected to the university's communications office. Meaning someone inside the administration might have been involved. It sounded insane, but at that point, nothing surprised me anymore. Ethan said he thought the university had been monitoring the Gazette's inbox for months, quietly feeding them stories they could spin to promote a certain image of responsible campus leadership. The Ashcroft party was the perfect opportunity, an embarrassing but teachable incident they could parade around to justify new dorm restrictions and PR campaigns about student accountability. And I was the face of it. The convenient villain. The reckless student they could point to while tightening their grip. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it sounded too conspiratorial, but the fear crawling under my skin told me he wasn't. The next day, I got an email from the Gazette asking for a comment on a new piece they were publishing. University implements new party policies following Ashcroft incident. The article wasn't even out yet, and they were already quoting me as acknowledging responsibility. I hadn't said a word. Ethan told me not to respond, but it was too late. My name was everywhere again. The story got picked up by local news outlets, even mentioned on a regional college blog. Alderwood student causes dorm evacuation, the headline read. My phone didn't stop buzzing. DMs from strangers, nasty comments, even my professor sending concerned messages asking if I needed help. Kara avoided me completely. She started staying with friends across campus, claiming she needed space. But one night, around 1 a.m., she came back to grab her things. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard her on the phone, whispering. I only caught fragments, something about the deal, the photos, and they said it was fine. I froze in bed, heart pounding. The next morning, she was gone again, and half her stuff was missing. Ethan and I met later that day at the cafe again. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He said he'd found something else, something buried in the Gazette's content management system. Apparently, there was an unpublished draft of the very first article about my party, saved days before it ever happened. The headline was the same, the body similar, but the timestamp was from 2 days before the event took place. That meant someone had already planned the story in advance. I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't even know what to say. Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "This was never about you throwing a party, Mia. This was planned." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the photo the vice-chancellor showed me, the professional quality, the perfect angle. Someone had been in that hallway before the alarm ever went off, taking pictures. Watching us. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The photo Kara leaked, the article timing, the university's involvement, it was all too perfect. And then, as if to confirm my worst fear, I got a text from an unknown number again. This time, it said, "Stop digging, Mia. You don't want to end up like Ethan." I looked at the message, trembling, and before I could even ask what it meant, Ethan called me. His voice was low, shaking. "Someone broke into my dorm room," he said. "My laptop's gone." When Ethan told me his laptop was gone, I didn't even know what to say. My throat went dry, my mind spinning through every horrible possibility. His laptop had everything, emails, notes, drafts, and the photo files that proved what we'd found. I asked if he'd reported it, but he just laughed bitterly and said, "To who? Campus security? The same people who probably took it?" I wanted to tell him he was overreacting, but deep down, I knew he wasn't. Things had gotten too specific, too deliberate, too orchestrated. He said he'd noticed someone following him around campus the last couple of days, a guy wearing a staff badge he didn't recognize. He'd even seen him outside the journalism building late at night, just standing near the door. We decided to meet that evening in person to talk through what to do next, but when I got to our usual cafe, Ethan wasn't there. I waited for an hour, texting him nonstop, calling over and over. Nothing. I eventually walked back to Ashcroft Hall, feeling like the walls of the entire campus were closing in on me. That's when I noticed something strange taped to my dorm door, a folded piece of paper, no name, no handwriting, just a printed sentence, "You've caused enough trouble. Stop." I ripped it down, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I ran straight to Kara's old side of the room, half expecting her to pop out and start laughing, but her things were gone. Completely gone. Drawers empty, closet bare. She'd officially moved out without saying a word. I sat on my bed trying to breathe. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number, "We told you to stop." I don't even remember hitting call, but somehow I ended up on the phone with Ethan's friend, Mark, another journalism major. His voice was tight and fast. He told me Ethan hadn't been seen since last night, that he'd missed all his classes, and that the department chair said he'd taken personal leave. Personal leave, again. Like the university had just erased him overnight. My stomach dropped. I went straight to the journalism building myself, but when I asked at the front desk about Ethan, the receptionist just said, "We don't discuss student records." She said it like she'd been told exactly what to say. I started realizing how deep this thing might go. That night, I got desperate. I went digging through my own messages, trying to piece together anything I could use. That's when I remembered Kara's old laptop. She'd left it behind weeks ago after it crashed and stopped turning on. It was still under her bed. I pulled it out and tried to boot it up, and after about 10 minutes, it finally flickered to life. Most of the files were wiped, but one folder stood out, Com Project. Inside were several screenshots of emails between Kara and someone with the address mediarelations@alderwood.edu. My hands shook as I scrolled. The earliest one was from 3 weeks before the party. It read, "Thank you for your cooperation. Remember, the content should look organic. Students trust authenticity." Another message said, "We'll credit your submission through a student intermediary for anonymity. You'll receive priority consideration for the PR internship." I couldn't breathe. It was all there. The school's communications office had reached out to Kara weeks in advance, asking her to help with a student life story they could use to highlight safety and accountability. They'd essentially planted her to make sure something newsworthy happened. They'd baited us. And I'd walked straight into it. My hands were shaking so badly I accidentally dropped the laptop. The screen cracked, but it was still working. I took photos of everything on my phone and sent them to myself just in case. I knew I needed to tell someone, anyone, but I didn't know who I could trust. Not the university. Not the Gazette. Maybe the police, but what was I supposed to say? My school staged a dorm party for PR and made me the villain? Who would believe that? Then, around midnight, my phone lit up with a call. It was Ethan. His voice was shaky, almost whispering. He said he was fine, that he was off campus for a few days, but that things were worse than we thought. He said he'd broken into the Gazette's file archive before his laptop disappeared, and he'd found internal memos showing that the dean of students had personally approved the Ashcroft story days before it happened. They had the headline written, quotes drafted, even the photo layout planned. He said there was one more thing, something he couldn't explain over the phone, but he'd emailed it to me in case something happened. Before I could ask what he meant, the line went dead. I checked my inbox, and there it was, an email from Ethan, no subject line, just one attachment, a photo. When I opened it, my heart stopped. It was security footage. The timestamp matched the night of the party. The camera angle showed the Ashcroft hallway, students walking in and out, laughing, music echoing. But in the corner, partially obscured by shadows, stood a man wearing a staff badge, holding a camera. The same man Ethan said he'd seen near the journalism building. The video looped for about 30 seconds before cutting off. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, realization creeping through me like ice. Someone had been filming the party deliberately, before, during, and after the alarm went off. This wasn't bad luck or chaos. It was controlled. Engineered. I was never the story, they just needed someone to play the part. That's when I heard a knock on my dorm door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I froze. It was almost 1 a.m., and no one ever came by that late. I didn't move. The knocks came again, louder this time. I crept toward the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. But when I looked down, there was an envelope on the floor. My name was printed on it in bold black letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper that said, "You wanted the truth, Mia. Let's talk. Journalism building. Basement. Midnight tomorrow." And underneath, in small print, "Come alone." I didn't sleep at all that night. Every sound outside my dorm made me jump, every vibration of my phone made my heart race. I kept rereading that note, trying to decide if it was a trap or a real attempt to meet. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself that if I didn't go, I might never find out what actually happened, or what happened to Ethan. So the next night, I went. The campus was quiet, too quiet. The journalism building sat on the edge of the quad, the kind of old brick structure that always smelled faintly like dust and coffee. Its basement level wasn't somewhere students usually went. It was used for old equipment storage and archives. When I got there, the hallway lights flickered weakly. My footsteps echoed against the linoleum as I made my way to the bottom of the stairs. At the end of the corridor, one door was slightly ajar, light spilling out from inside. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a small, windowless office stacked with filing cabinets and cardboard boxes. Sitting at the desk was Professor Lang, the advisor for the student newspaper. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes. He gestured for me to sit. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "But I guess you were always going to." I asked him what this was all about, and he sighed, rubbing his temples. He said the story about the party wasn't supposed to happen that way. That the communications department had been under pressure to boost the university's transparency image after several internal scandals about dorm safety. They'd hired the student paper to observe and report on spontaneous campus life moments, and Kara had volunteered to help because she wanted a recommendation. But when the story went viral, the administration realized it was a perfect distraction. They exaggerated everything, safety violations, alcohol reports, even student names, to make themselves look like they were cracking down. I asked about Ethan. Lang looked away. "He pushed too hard," he said. "He broke into files that weren't his. Someone higher up didn't like that. I've been told he's been suspended indefinitely, but unofficially, he trailed off. You shouldn't try to find him." I could barely breathe. I asked why he'd called me there, and he reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a flash drive. "Because if you're smart, you'll take this and leave," he said. "It has copies of emails, drafts, everything. Proof that the administration staged the entire thing. But if you release it under your name, you'll be expelled. Or worse." I took it, but before I could ask anything else, there was a noise upstairs, a door slamming, footsteps. Lang's face went pale. "Go," he said sharply. "Now." I ran. I didn't even look back. I didn't stop until I was back in my dorm room, shaking, my mind spinning with everything I'd just heard. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, and there it was, hundreds of files. Internal memos between the dean and media relations, photo drafts with fake timestamps, and the original version of the story before it was rewritten. The earliest draft even had my name in it weeks before the party happened. They had chosen me. I wasn't unlucky, I was picked. My hands trembled as I scrolled through one last file labeled Ashcroft Follow-up. It was an email from the dean himself, ensure disciplinary measures align with the narrative. The subject should express remorse but ultimately represent institutional improvement. I stared at it, realizing I was the subject. They had written my apology before I'd even done anything. I don't remember crying, but I remember the way my hands hurt from clutching the laptop too tight. I sent everything to a private tip line for a local news outlet. Then I deleted every trace of the files from my computer and the flash drive. I didn't want to know what would happen if someone found out I'd sent them. Days went by. No one said anything. The newsletter stopped mentioning me, and life on campus moved on like nothing had ever happened. Kara's internship announcement disappeared from the school website. Lang's office was suddenly on indefinite leave. Ethan never came back. It was like the whole thing had been scrubbed clean. Then, about a week later, a new article appeared, this time on an independent student blog unaffiliated with the school. The headline read, "Inside the Manufactured Scandal at Alderwood University." It included screenshots of the emails, photos, and even the security footage of the staff member filming the dorm hallway. I hadn't written it, but it used the same files I'd sent to the local station. Someone had leaked it. And the story exploded. National outlets picked it up within days. University PR manipulates student event for press coverage. The dean resigned. The PR director was fired. And suddenly, I wasn't the reckless party girl anymore, I was the whistleblower. They called me brave. They said I'd stood up against corruption. But the truth was, I hadn't done it for heroics. I'd done it because I was terrified. Because I didn't want to disappear like Ethan. Months later, I transferred schools quietly. Sometimes I still get emails from journalists asking for comment, but I never respond. I still have nightmares about that night, the lights flickering in the basement, the footsteps, the way Lang's voice shook when he said go. I haven't heard from Ethan since, but sometimes I check the blog's comments section. Every few months, there's a new anonymous post that just says, "Still watching." I don't know if it's him, or someone else. But every time I see it, I remember the note that started it all: "You've caused enough trouble. Stop." And I realize that maybe, even after all this time, someone still hasn't forgiven me for turning their story into mine.